Tahoe, California, the reading capital of the world. We're on a mission to make reading fun and achievable for all. Each week, we read no more than 99 pages of a book, and we live stream a discussion with awesome panelists and Q&A right here. Even if you can't squeeze into reading, that's okay. You got 99 problems. Reading ain't one. If you enjoy the conversation, please hit subscribe below. Every vote of support counts. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn and YouTube at 99 Pages Club. Now, on this Wednesday, we are celebrating Veterans Day. And, we just finished up as a nation a very divisive election. And I felt it was important for us to look at examples of those who, no matter their political alignments, their identities, their race, their genders, etc., can put their differences aside and get a job done. And I can speak from firsthand experience that our nation's service members do this day in and day out. So for the month of November, we're going to spend some time honoring our nation's veterans. And we're doing that by reading Tribe by Sebastian Junger. So we can get a bit in the headspace of the veteran and see if we can glean some of those tribal unifying instincts off of them so we can move forward as a country. Now, normally I introduce our panelists. We got an all-star panel today, but today what I'd love for them to do is to actually introduce themselves. So panel, I'm just so grateful. Thank you for your service. Thank you for making time. I'd love to just go around the horn and have you just tell us a little bit about, tell us your name, where you're from, and what you did in the service. And Melissa, may I start with you?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Melissa Boatwright. Originally from, I'll do the whole military thing because when you ask a military person where they're from, we have like 10 answers. I'm originally from Wyoming. I lived 6 years in San Francisco. I lived in Philadelphia. I lived in Charleston, South Carolina. I've lived in Germany and Iraq and South Korea, but currently in Portland, Oregon. We moved in midst of the pandemic. So Portland is where we call home now. I am prior active duty Air Force. So I joined the Air Force when I was 19 years old from Wyoming. My dad is Army National Guard, so retired as a command sergeant major of the state of Wyoming. So I had sort of military surrounding me most of my life. Did 10 years active duty Air Force as an enlisted broadcaster. So if anybody remembers the movie Good Morning Vietnam, Adrian Cronauer was a real guy. That's the job that I had in the military. And then transitioned to the reserves, where I then also had the opportunity to get my commission. And I'm still a reservist in the Air Force out of Travis Air Force Base as a public affairs person still. What do I do now? When I first got out, went into sort of comms, strategic communications, marketing, did that for about 5 or 6 years before I realized it wasn't really my bag. And then found myself in Bay Area tech. So I worked as a chief of staff for a chief technology officer in the Bay for a couple of years, went on to run his global program office. Now I lead a team of data and analysts at LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. We're really excited for you to be here. Cal, why don't I hand it to you, man?
Hey, everyone. I'm Cal Walters. Rajiv, thanks so much for having me. Love your sweatshirt, by the way. I think my wife just commented about that. Melissa, I want to hear about what it's like to be a broadcaster. That sounds really cool. But I am an Army officer right now in the Army. I'm a major. I'm currently an Army JAG, which means I'm a lawyer, and I run the criminal prosecution section at the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg. I grew up with really no affiliation with the Army, but my grandfather served in World War II, and then around college time, it's a long story, but I ended up going to West Point, went to West Point for 4 years, and then commissioned as an infantry officer, and then married my wife. We went out to Hawaii. I know, someone's got to do it. We did that for 3 years. And did a little trip to Iraq in the middle of that time in Hawaii, and then served as an aide to a general out there in Hawaii. And then I decided after some thought that I wanted to go to law school. And so I found out about this program where the Army will send you to law school, and they'll pay for it in exchange for some time after that as a JAG. And so I decided to do that, took 3 years, went to law school, and then commissioned as a JAG officer. And I've been doing that for the past 4 or 5 years, mostly doing criminal law, where we actually work on prosecutions to kind of instill good order and discipline in the service. And it's a lot of fun. It's always an adventure. We've lived in probably 5 or 6 different places, and my wife has been kind enough to join me at all those places. And we have a little daughter who is 6 years old. Her name is Georgia. So thanks for having me on, Rajiv.
Absolutely. And let's be very clear. We're just trying to get closer to Natalie and Georgia. All right. You're just baggage at this point, Cal.
Very true. Well, I would understand that.
Oh man, they're absolutely wonderful. Alan, I'm so excited to have you on. Alan McClinton, would you mind introducing yourself, sir?
Absolutely. Cal, I just have to say, Georgia, that is such a beautiful name. And so So I'm Alan McClinton.
Thanks,
I am a husband, father of 3 little kids, 4, 3, and 1. So that's, kids that young give you a lot of gray hair. Grew up in the South. And so from Florida, Georgia area, a Southern boy. And I was an air support officer in the Marine Corps. Got to serve kind of all over the globe. I'm just so thrilled to be here. I mean, Cal and Melissa, your introductions and the things that y'all have done is quite amazing. So stoked to be in this conversation with y'all.
Well, thank you, folks. And to anyone else out there watching, we're just so grateful to have you on. You can always ask questions of our panel in the chat. I know we got our chat on fire right now. Appreciate everybody tuning in. And if you would like to ask questions anonymously, that's absolutely acceptable as well at safe.99pagesclub.com. All right. So for this, we're kicking off Tribe. It's a very short book, right? It's almost like an extended memo. But it opens up in a really interesting fashion, right? I was expecting to be reading about war and heroism from the get-go, but we found ourselves in like colonial America. Cal, I would love to start off with you, sir, if that's all right. What were your first impressions of the book, particularly as someone who's still on active duty?
Yeah, well, I want to thank you, Rajiv, for picking a short book. I feel like you did that for me because, I can barely read, so I appreciate that.
Well, I had to pick it that just in case we had like a Naval Academy graduate, right? They have shorter attention spans.
I support that. I support that. Be Navy. That's right.
Be Navy.
So, dude, honestly, this book was fascinating to me. So we only read 50 pages, but I was fascinated. The basic gist of the intro, probably the first 15, 20 pages was this concept that back in about the 1700s, 1600s, a lot of the folks that were the settlers found themselves being attracted to these American Indian tribes. And that's the term that the author uses. And it wasn't happening the other way around. A lot of the American Indian tribes were not as enticed by Western civilization, which is interesting, right? That certainly begs the question, why? Like, why would Western civilization, with all of its creature comforts, be less attractive to some of these folks than these American Indian tribes? And so that's really the question that it leads to. And I found this initial 50 pages to be fascinating, thought-provoking. It made me ask a lot of questions about, kind of purpose, I think, is one of the things that really gets at. And we haven't really gotten in yet in the book into kind of the military part of this, but I think he does a good job of setting that up with this interesting discussion of what tribes really are and why they are the way they are and why people find them to be interesting.
Melissa, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I would say, first, thank you for the added motivation to read the book. I read War, which I think is like a must read for anybody who's interested in sort of like what the deployment experience looks like. And so this was on my list for a long time to read. So I appreciate the extra nudge to actually move it up the list. For me, especially the first 50 pages are really interesting, unexpected, and a little bit where is this going? What exactly is happening here? And even, so I've read beyond the first 50 pages as a female veteran. I'm also a little bit sensitive to, it's very common for female veterans like myself to have to find their experience within kind of a male archetyped story. And I feel that a little bit with this story. I don't feel like my unique veteranness as a woman is really yet to be sort of like represented in the book so far.
Can we, I feel like that's an incredibly important concept. I guess I have my first question is, maybe could you dive in on that? What is unique about the female veteran experience that may not be generally known or by either the population at large or even the American veteran community that's majority male? So I'd be interested to hear if you could define a little bit more.
Yeah, I think if I distill it down to like some really tactical examples of what makes being a woman in the military different than being a man in the military is so I joined the military when I was 19, grew up in Wyoming my whole life, like went from a town of 5,000 people to living in Germany, not knowing anybody, all by myself. And the first thing that another woman will do for you is tell you the men who are unsafe to be around. Like literally, you are 19 years old, you're away from home, and the other women in the room will be like, be careful with that guy. And everybody knows what that means. And so I think that's like when I think about a deployment, which I went on to Iraq or places like that, I'm not just thinking about my physical safety from the enemy, from the people with guns that are trying to kill us. But every day in the military, I am aware of how safe I am physically or emotionally. And I think that's a totally different experience that is unique to underrepresented communities in the military.
Absolutely.
Melissa, I'd like to add to that because it's so interesting you say that, because that is the first, as a Black man in the military, that was one of the first things that fellow minority and Black officers told me. They said, not so about safety, but they said, Alan, you're not going to be treated on equal terms with your fellow officers. You're going to have to do above and beyond just to be average. Expect that when things go wrong, that you will be the first one to be looked at. And if you don't have your stuff together and your T's aren't crossed and your periods aren't dotted, that you will be looked at. And that is the first thing. And that is from 100% of the officers. And in fact, some generals even told me, I want you to read these very specific books because you really need to understand the environment that you are entering. And this is still America, and even encapsulated in a very small group organization of the Marine Corps, and that these realities exist even more in this petri dish, and you're going to need to know how to swim. And so very similar experience as a Black man in the military.
Thanks for sharing that.
It's interesting. So one of the, thank you guys both for sharing that. It's interesting too, just how so different my experience has been. Again, just as a white male, you kind of walk in and I never thought once about those things. And certainly no one pulled me aside and said, hey, as a white male, you're going to experience these things. And certainly it's really helpful to learn those experiences. I wonder though, so one of the things that Sebastian does in the initial parts is he defines tribe as the people who feel compelled to share the last of your food with. He gives that example of, that person coming to him where he's hitchhiking and feels compelled, a responsibility to give him a sandwich because he didn't think he could make it to California. Taking that definition into mind, do you guys feel like the military was a tribe for you? Even, kind of with those experiences that you shared initially?
Go ahead, Melissa.
I would say I found my tribes I found those communities of safety. Like I have, my very first, or one of my very first roommates in the Air Force is still one of my best friends today. We're the godparents to their children. Like there were moments like that, but interestingly, so there's the event with Vanessa Gillen, the murder of Vanessa Gillen in Texas, which is, really kind of, there's a lot of like mystery around what happened. There's a lot of conspiracies around it. And in the early days of that, there was a female officer who I think was still active duty. And she said, well, sexual harassment is just the price of admission. And so there's this, and I don't think she meant like, you just have to, she was just stating a fact. Like, you have to be prepared that this is the penance you have to pay to serve if you want to be a female service member. And, you know, I think so maybe I didn't feel the same sense of community whenever I walked into any room, but I found little communities in almost every place that I served while I was in.
Yeah, for me, Cal, I love that you bring that up about the tribe, because I share this a lot as an example with the hope that I have for race relations across America. And I've been having a lot of these conversations, is that, man, I joined the Marine Corps during 2007, right in OCS in Quantico, Virginia. And I walk into that bay and you have people from all swaths of America. There's people from Kentucky, Tennessee, and some of these, you know, white guys, they hadn't worked truly with a black man before, and they were racist. You know, they were like, I can't be in a platoon with this, you know, all types of racial terms. But very quickly,
Wow.
as all boot camps do, it gets real. And when things get real, it strips away all the fluff. And I found these brothers, call them brothers now, but these men who started our relationship as racist, by the end of OCS and through, you know, shared suffering that it talks about in the book,
Yeah.
willing to share everything. Well, the military forces shared suffering, where on cold nights we just had to get next to each other. On tough things, we had to work things out. And it's through those shared experiences that form these bonds that are deeper than the color of our skin, deeper even than how the way and the things that defined us as we grow from our families. I found these linkages with these other brothers and sisters in arms, that I begin to trust these individuals more than I trust some of my own families. And they come from racist families. They were racist at first, but at the end of it, they knew when we walked across that boot camp, and some of them I served with, you know, in real operations. These are people that I trust with my life. We were forced to trust each other. And that brings me so much hope, because I think in America and across the globe that, you know, through these tough times of COVID and all the tumultuous that's going around the world, if we share in that suffering together and we really begin to start really depending on one another, that will create ties that go beyond the fluff of racism and I wouldn't say even sexism, but I can only talk about racism that I felt in the tribe of the military. I saw racism just evaporate on the first night of us suffering. These were my brothers and sisters now that I could trust with my life.
Wow.
So what I'm hearing, Alan, is that interdependence between you and your fellow Marines, and that the same across the Army and the Air Force and the Navy. That interdependence ultimately is what helps start shedding around, because it's a means of necessity, right? You can't carry around the baggage of bias if your life is depending on it, or you're surviving, you know? And so you got to take that off and just get the job done. Well, you know, I got to ask this then, you know, because it would have been very easy for us to start off this discussion with like a rah, 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 all veterans are awesome, we're all so supportive of each other, yay. And I love how we dove into, actually, there is a rift, like there's something missing here, right? Or at least not necessarily being spoken to directly, which is the fractions or sub-tribe and the sub-tribal experiences of, say, you know, black women, black people, women, and you know, LGBTQ folks that have gone through their own struggles with the military, and so that's kind of interesting. So I guess, Melissa, if I can ask you this, do you feel like your treatment in the military as a woman, like how does that affect your relationship with the veteran tribe? Do you still feel like a lot of pain, and do you carry that in your heart, or do you feel like, yeah, that was part of it, but we all have bad experiences? And I'm interested to hear how that may differ from my identity as a veteran, or Alan, or Cal's identity as a veteran.
Yeah, I would say, well, first I would like recognize my privilege in this story, right? In that now, especially, I am an officer. I'm in charge of a community that is a much different experience than a 19-year-old junior enlisted person's experience in the military. I'm a white woman, so I have the privilege of being white. I'm, well educated. I have this whole other life, from the military. So I know that the path that I walk today is very different than the path that I walked as 19-year-old Melissa joining the military, but is certainly much different than paths like Vanessa Gillen and other women of color in the military are experiencing, or lesbian women in the military are experiencing. Like for me though, the way it really manifests today is I'm going to say hypersensitive to the bro club. And if I walk into a room and it's filled with a bunch of veterans and it feels super bro-y, I'm like, I'm out. I don't need to deal with this. Like, I'm a grown ass woman. I can go like be with people that will lift and support me, instead of being around people where I feel like I have to hustle to prove that I belong in the room with them. So I think that's probably where it's like shows up the most today. And I still walk into rooms with a bunch of veterans and I'm like, I'm the only woman in this room.
Mm.
This doesn't feel like a place that I want to be in right now.
Wow. Well, I think that's definitely a calling for all of us to make sure that we're reaching out and making folks like Melissa feel comfortable when we're in those circles. Alan, do you feel that way as well, man?
Yeah, in the military, I've always, as a black man, always being in circles that are, as I've gone through my career and increased my education, it seems like fewer and fewer black people are around me. I see that as my mission, actually. One of my mission statement is to be a bridge to empower my community. I consider my community as black men and women to infiltrate and immerse themselves, to be a bridge to immerse more and more of people that come from my socioeconomic background into these rooms to represent themselves and express themselves. And so coming into the military, and it's mainly me there in the COC, and I'm the only black officer in there briefing senior leaders. That was nothing new to me. I had experienced that all throughout college and up. So it's been a part of my life from the very start. So it wasn't something that was a shock when entering the military tribe.
Super interesting. I got to tell you, as I hear both of you guys describe your experiences as a woman and a black man, I got to admit, part of my head is also spinning, because, I was an Indian guy walking through the halls of West Point and the Army, and I experienced my share of racism, just like everyone else. But I got to say that I think I had an easier time assimilating. Right? It's not like there was this giant Indian community in the United States Army that was like, like, this is who you are. This is the label. I could lose my, I didn't have to have an accent. I didn't have to, I almost kind of assimilated. I like hyper assimilated. I almost like forgot that part of my identity and just became, I even say it somewhat jokingly today, but one of the only Indian things about me is my name. And I think, like, growing up in Roanoke, Virginia, going to West Point in the Army, I've suppressed that part of my identity so far down. And I also want to say that, Alan, I had a similar experience as you, where I had a plebe year squad mate who said some really not nice things to me when I was a kid. But years later, nearly a decade later, he actually wrote me a random Facebook message, and he was like, "Hey, man, by the way, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I've come around on a lot of things. I just want to apologize." And it was just such an interesting moment that, like, whether in the service or even slightly after, some of these like experiences and the trajectories that it takes us on, it provides those means to kind of see the world through a different lens. You know, Cal, I got to ask, man, you're active duty during a time of COVID and there's a pandemic going around. So I got to ask, like, this level of cohesion, does it still exist when you're 6 feet away and wearing a mask? Like, what is the vibe between soldiers today?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to answer that. I just want to say how much I'm enjoying this conversation, and I just love every time I come on these, Rajiv. I learned so much. So thank you guys for sharing your story. And so right now, obviously, COVID's going on. I'm active duty, and we are showing up to work. We're showing up to work. We wear masks. We take a lot of precautions for COVID, but we're still going to PT. We keep our social distancing. We wear masks when we're in meetings. But I think it's interesting, Rajiv. Reflecting on that in the moment, I think one of the things it highlights is just that we feel like the mission is really important, and that we have to continue to do the mission. The mission just can't stop, and so that's one part of it. I think honestly, I think it's made us a little bit more human. Sometimes the Army or the military can be a little bit rigid. It can be a little bit, sometimes it doesn't take into account that we have other things going on, that we have weaknesses. So you have, for example, people in my office who have working spouses, who have kids that are doing remote learning. And so we're having to be a little bit more flexible in how we accomplish the mission. Like, oh yeah, you can stay home and work remotely for, the time that you need so that you can take care of your family and you can take care of the things that you need to take care of. So I think one of my favorite authors, Patrick Lencioni, I know one of the things he said during this time is that people need to be exceedingly human. And I think that's what I've found the Army is becoming a little bit more human in the way we deal with accomplishing the mission, which is obviously important.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Cal. By the way, I want to make sure, I know we got some folks in the chat. You're always welcome to send us questions anonymously at safe.99pagesclub.com or send questions in the chat. Actually, what I'd love to do is ask you guys this. Like, one of the words that I picked up on in your description, Cal, was the word structure. And I can't tell you, like, when I transitioned out of the service, how many people kind of came in with like a baseline assumption that, like, oh, you were a soldier, you were a veteran, you're way too overstructured, right? So you couldn't possibly manage in this like creative Silicon Valley, right? And I'm just curious, maybe Alan, like, I would love to actually start off with you, man. You're working for Tesla, right? You're working for one of the most creative and productive companies in the world. And I'm just curious, man, like, how did the military experience give you, like, how did you make that transition? Did you find that you were overstructured and you had to loosen up when you came to Tesla? Like, what did you find, sir?
Yeah. I would say, I think, Cal, when you said it just right. The ship that you have to execute with in the military, that where effective leaders are extremely superhuman. What I mean by that, they are like superhuman. Like, they empathize, they sit and they listen. They listen behind and beyond the words of what someone is saying. And I found, like, and because in the military you're operating in very tense environments, there's a lot on the cost. Lives are on the line here, and there will be mistakes that are made. But the military is just this pressure cooker where you have to learn how to operate and work with others in very tense environments. And I would say that takes in and of itself creative judgment, creative decision making, critical thinking, much more than I see you operated in Silicon Valley to be able to launch a product or to go to market or to execute on something at scale. I mean, in the military, that's exactly what you're doing, but with people's lives on the lines. And so, coming out of the military, yes, I ran into the bias that people would say, "Oh, you're a military captain, so you probably lead like this." And it was just, I was, at first I didn't have responses, but then I began to share stories of what, my particular leadership looked like, how I handled certain situations, and begin to start sharing that story. And I would say that, you know, I'm just a manager at Tesla. That I would say my boss more has really been inspired by the way that, man, this guy seeks to woo people into action, not command people into action. Now, do I hold people accountable? Absolutely. Do I seek to be a great steward of people's resources and get deep into the details and an expertise at what I need to handle? Absolutely. But am I commanding people like what they may see on Saving Private Ryan? No, I have to woo people. I have to encourage people. I have to give my team a purpose that they own to go and conquer. And so my top boss is amazed at the drive that my team has. Now, of course, there's a lot of other things that I had to learn as I transitioned from military leadership to corporate leadership, and tons of things that I failed at. I don't want to sit here and say that I was just state of the art business person, but I would say in terms of leadership and being superhuman about it, absolutely. Military was the best teacher.
Melissa, how about you? How did that structure, how did you market yourself or use that structure?
Yeah, so in my early days, so I left active duty when Alan went to OCS, it sounds like. So I've been out of the military now, or out of active duty, longer than I was in the military. And in the early days, actually, it was my like structure and ability to get stuff done that was a core value that I brought to a team, right? One of my first jobs out of the military was helping to build like marketing collateral for a plaintiff's law firm, like a very famous plaintiff's law firm, the law firm that was in the tobacco litigation. I think it was called like the Inside Guy, or so. I'll figure out what it was called. Anyway, they were like this super famous plaintiff's law firm, but no offense, Cal, like you get a bunch of lawyers together and they're really good at doing some stuff, and getting stuff done in other spaces was not great. And so this comfort with structure, I think, was actually really, really valuable to me. One of the things I did need to mature though, as I like left the military, was I did have this belief that leadership looked a certain way, right? It looked like an alpha male, and that's how I needed to show up as a leader in order to be effective. Like I needed to be, and this isn't just the military, by the way, I grew up in rural Wyoming. So I came to the military with a very like tomboyish, like, don't be like a girl, be more like a boy. That's what's good. So I came to this sort of like conditioned with that. And actually what I've found over the years is my like special sauce as a leader and a manager is my ability to be an empathetic leader. And now we're also, as a culture, I think, starting to talk more about empathetic leadership anyway. And in the book, it's a little bit past the first 50 pages, but he says, you know, when he's talking about these different gender roles and how stress kind of brings out different leadership styles, you know, he talks about if women aren't present to provide empathetic leadership that every group needs, men will do it. And what's cool about that is like, that means like men are capable of being empathetic leaders. Like, I know that seems obvious, but let's just say it, right? Y'all are capable of like this broad swath of different styles of leadership. That is a relatively new concept. So to hear Alan talk about like being superhuman and being connected to the people on the team, and that's how you get the best of your team, like flies in the face of every military stereotype movie we see, right? Like, so I just think it's really great. I think my own though journey has been learning that more and more. And when I am at my best, it's when I can lay down my desire and compulsion maybe to be perfect, a perfect manager, a perfect leader, a perfect worker, and really be there with my team and figure out what we need to do.
Well said. That's awesome. If you guys don't mind, we have a couple of questions that have come in, and I'd love to just pass them on to you. The first one, I'd actually love to direct at Alan and Melissa. And so basically what this question basically says, I'm former soldier. I've left active duty, and I'm trying to get into the technology industry. However, I feel boxed out. It feels like no one gets what we've done. It doesn't feel like a fair process, and no one recognizes the names or the duties on my resume. How does Silicon Valley actually really think about veterans? Do I need to recast my experience in another light? Well, first off to that, submitter, I want to say thank you for that vulnerability. I mean, it's a tough time out there, and I appreciate the hunt, and rest assured you can reach out. I'm sure you can reach out to any one of us, and we'd love to help you for sure. So Alan McClinton, Melissa Boatwright, Rajiv Srinivas, we're here for you, and we're all on LinkedIn. Melissa, maybe you could kick us off. What would be your advice to this this veteran?
Oh, first I would say your feelings and experiences is valid. Like it's real. We at LinkedIn, we actually evaluated the employment journeys of the 2.5 million members that are military members, veterans on the platform of LinkedIn.com. And what we found is there are certain places in the United States where your veteran status makes it easier to get a job, making you more likely to get employed, and other places where it makes it harder, like San Francisco, like New York City, like some of the hubs where you would expect, there isn't a large military base or a current military base. There's tons of like older military presence in San Francisco, but not as much as it used to be. So first of all, the thing you're feeling is real. It is tough. The second thing I would say is you're going to have to figure out how to translate what you did and have done into what the hiring managers find valuable or the recruiters find valuable. Like that's a worthy investment of your time. And know that the other side of the equation, the people that are getting your resumes, may not be putting in the work yet to translate what your skills and experiences could mean to them. So it's important that you do that work and you get your resume so it's in the speak of the positions and the people you're trying to talk to. And then the last thing I would say is, I call it the veteran mafia in San Francisco. Once you're connected to one veteran in the Bay Area, you're like 2 degrees of separation from all of us. So use the 3 of us to like find your way in to those companies, because we know that's still the easiest or the best way, the most efficient way to get hired into a company is to know somebody that works there.
Yep. Alan, what do you think, man?
Melissa, those are awesome things. The only thing I would just add is, for me, I had the same struggle. In fact, I had come out of the military, then went to Wharton, and then still struggled to get good jobs in the Bay Area. So there I was really frustrated. I think one thing that helped me, and something that I had a conversation with Rajiv, he helped me out, was I had to get really real with what I'm about. I know in this book, it talks about having, one of the overarching things that in a tribe, such as the military, is this overarching mission and purpose that really solidifies us. And that purpose isn't, always, it's not so baked into an ideology about the USA. It was really, that purpose was about each other, the person who's on your left and right flank that you're fighting for and with. And so as I transition out of the military, you kind of leave this awesome connected tribe with this, unified mission, to now you're entering the corporate world where this, everything is everybody has their own mission. It's just a lot of organizations with their own thing. There's no overarching corporate America mission. And so I had to get real with what I'm about. And that took some self-discovery. And I would encourage you, for me, one of the tools that I use is I started journaling. I think a very good book, I love that Cal mentioned it, is Patrick Lencioni. He writes some really good business books, but he writes it from a perspective to help you discover your why. What's the why behind your leadership? What's the why? Like 5 whys of why you want this position. And I'm not saying you need to have this like deep, intrinsic, identified North target to start applying and getting a job, because you do need to survive. You got responsibilities. But I'm just saying that it helps when you are in Silicon Valley to bring a level of authenticity when you're in those conversations with the recruiters, or if you're in with veterans asking to say, hey, will you sponsor me in this organization? Say I was trying to get at LinkedIn. I am so passionate about the economic graph of the world. I want to be about being connected, connecting marginalized people into that economic graph. Let me be about it. And I would say a recruiter would really feel it that way, because I'm coming authentic. Find that authentic North Star and start presenting that. That was the only thing I would add.
Well said, Alan. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that we could use you at LinkedIn when you're in the market.
Rajiv, I think they want to hear your answer to the question.
I want to hear your answer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think one thing that, and I would actually say that my time, remember how I mentioned that I had to assimilate, right? There's not like this big cohort of Indian people, and I had to assimilate culturally very quickly in the Army. I would say that actually has taught me the lesson that yes, the military and the service is a tribe, but you know what? LinkedIn is a tribe. VMware is a tribe. Salesforce is a tribe. Each one of these corporate cultures, Tesla is Lord knows Tesla is a tribe, right? Each one of these corporate cultures that we're applying to, that we're aspiring to, they themselves have their own norms, their own hierarchies, their own personalities, their own, standard operating procedures, if you will, their own SOPs. So I think one thing that I thought I did fairly well coming in was I recognized that if I want to be a member of that tribe, I got to walk that walk and talk that talk. And so what I would say is that it can't just be like this is what a good resume looks like. I think you got to think about it like this. There's effectively a custom sales cycle for each company you apply to and each role you apply to. And if you think about it in that, like, I'm not just applying for a job, I'm trying to be a part of your corporate tribe. I think that's, you got to live and breathe. And especially every one of these companies has a mission, right? They have a vision for the world. They have investors that have certain market theses upon which they are making their investment. And I think really surrounding yourself with that vision of the world and let's say the capitalist pathway to get there is really important, that preparation. And so hopefully you get in touch with us. Hopefully those answers were helpful. And I really appreciate that question.
Love to help.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, we're all here for you. We stick together. I want to bring in some of the questions that are coming in from the chat. Judy Bello asked questions for all of you, and I'll actually, Cal, I'll direct this to you since you are active duty. Did you ever feel frustrated that your active military service precludes you and restricts your participation in politics? And I love that question, right? And I know the little soldier in me had a little heart attack when I read it, because we're really not allowed to talk about any of this stuff, right? But it's such a tense time right now, and I have no doubt that in the back rooms of your office, when you're sitting down with the soldiers, and you see a guy like Donald Trump get elected president, say some of these things that are a little off color, at least. Sometimes on color, excuse me. But sorry, a little pun there. Everybody like that?
I got it.
Sorry.
I got it.
That's good. I got that one on, I think, SNL. Anyways, but I'm just curious, like, how do you talk about it? How do you wrap your head around like all the implications of this reality TV show that we're all living in, as an active duty soldier?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, I mean, you don't have, you can still participate very much in politics. You can still vote. You can still, talk about certain candidates. You just have to limit the way that you do that. You certainly can't go to a rally in your uniform and speak on behalf of the military. And you have to obviously walk a fine line with the way you talk about certain partisan politics. But I think, Rajiv, most people, as we've already talked about, they find this higher purpose in the military. And ultimately, you're not swearing any type of oath to a person. You're swearing an oath to the Constitution of the United States. I had the opportunity the other day to watch 3 people get either re-enlisted or promoted. And it was just so cool. It brought tears to my eyes, literally. Thank God for the mask. It kept people from probably seeing it. But just seeing someone raise their right hand and literally swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, knowing full well that can mean their life. And so when you do that, you put, ultimately, of course, you care about politics, you care about the people that are your leaders, but at the end of the day, you're serving something far higher than that. So I think a lot of people, I'm sure if you polled the military, there'd be some people that are frustrated and wish they could speak more freely, perhaps, about certain candidates. But at the end of the day, I think to Alan's point earlier, I mean, there's this higher purpose that allows us all to kind of coalesce and fight the same fight, no matter who the president is, no matter which party's in power. And frankly, I think America can learn something from that there is an ability to kind of come together for some higher norms. And we probably do have far more in common when we really kind of step away than we do differences, I think. So.
Here.
If I could just add, as a reservist, and I would say that I tend to lean more progressive in my politics, despite coming from Wyoming and having been in the military my entire life. So to Alan's earlier point, like, we're a microcosm of the United States, and there's all kinds of people in the military, including people with more progressive politics. I had a really hard time earlier this year specifically when they talked about using the National Guard to start defending in the protests, right? And to start managing protesters. And I talked to a lot of people about it. First, I'm not a National Guards person, so it doesn't directly impact me personally. I'm in the Air Force Reserve, which is a federal asset. Very rarely would reservists be called as federal assets because we're not here to work in the United States. Typically it's overseas. But I talked to a lot of friends and a lot of veterans about it. And one of the things that really helped me sort of think about this, like reconciling my identity as somebody with certain political beliefs and this, like, I continue to serve in the military, which is at the discretion of the commander-in-chief, was there is no better person than for me to be there.
Love that.
It's good.
Well said.
Good, Melissa.
Alan, you have any thoughts on this question?
Yeah. No thoughts. I'm out, so I can't quite remember those days. So I've been active. I've been, very politically active, but I've been, I'm a civilian now. So
good for you, man. Thanks for continue to fight, man. We also have a question from Geeta Srinivasan, my mother. Do you feel that empathetic leadership develops with maturity and experience? And honestly, Melissa, you're one of the most empathetic leaders I think I've ever met. I'd love to hear if that is something that is developed in you over time, or were you just born with this big of a heart?
I was just born this way. For me, it came with self-acceptance. The more empathetic and compassionate I could be to myself, the more I could be that for other people. And so I also like understanding that I would call like an empath. I'm very sensitive to the emotional experience of other people, has also helped me like be more comfortable with being empathetic, because I think what used to happen is I would be overwhelmed by somebody else's emotions. Like I could feel them. And then I'd be like, get the F away from me with all that nonsense. Like I can't like go away. And now that I realize like, oh, I see what's happening. I'm taking on your emotions. Like, let me let you have your emotions. And that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. So again, it comes back to like me being compassionate and empathetic. So I think, yes, it is around maturity and experience, but for me, maturity and experience were far more about self-acceptance.
Excellent, excellent. Well, folks, this has just been a fantastic conversation, and we're at the last 10 minutes here. And I'd like to just kind of go around the horn and ask you guys just one last question, and that is, we're coming up on Veterans Day this Wednesday, I believe. And I'm just curious, like now that, each of you have been in the service or now out of the service for quite some time, you've experienced lots of Veterans Days, after swearing your oath. I'm just curious, like, what do you do and what do you do on Veterans Day? Like, what are some of the norms that you like that you like to engage in on Veterans Day to honor your service and to honor your experience? And I'm curious, like, what are the things that that kind of present the most meaning to you on Veterans Day, right? Whether it's remembering old service members that you served with, whether it's calling folks up, whether it's just putting all of that away and just being thankful for the life you have now. I'm just curious, like, how do y'all honor Veterans Day for yourselves and for others? Cal, maybe we could start with you, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's a great question, Rajiv. Honestly, so Veterans Day is always it's humbling in a way. It's kind of like, it's not like Memorial Day. They're very different, but I always feel like my service just kind of is not pales in comparison to those that have really just given so much. I think about the people's shoulders that we all stand on that have really like gone before us and paved the way and created kind of something out of nothing. But I have a lot of pride. I really do have a lot of pride in being part of something bigger than myself. Kind of tying it to this book, Tribe. I grew up playing sports. I grew up being part of a church, and those always gave me a lot of meaning, kind of collective suffering, collective purpose. And then I think now just serving in the military gives me a lot of that. It gives me a lot of pride. And just being part of it. So I reflect, I spend a lot of time just being thankful. I spend a lot of time kind of feeling humbled by those that I've had the opportunity to serve with. It's a really a special week. And I'm just thankful to be part of this country that really does treat its veterans really well.
Sure, absolutely. Alan, how about you, man?
Yeah, going off of what Cal said, I think what's most meaningful for me is the hope from my military experience and all the veterans out there. There's something that links us veterans, and I would even say veterans of even other countries, allied forces that we served with, that just that shared experience, that shared suffering, that kind of shared all-encompassing mission. It just links us in such a life, I feel like, eternal way. And it gives me hope because, as a Black man here in America, and I always kind of share this, is that, things are divisive. Even in my community, there's a lot of angry people. And I share this story with my Black brothers and sisters that there's hope out there for us. It isn't, and it's not hope I'm believing in the one man or one party. Beyond the party, there's hope in our neighborhoods. There's hope in us being a family. I love, by the way, that your mom is here supporting you, because families are the backbone of blood, and non-blood families are the backbone, I think, of America and the ideologies that we stand for. And so when I see Veteran Day, man, there's a twinkle in my eye around all vets, because whether you're from Tennessee, Kentucky, Wyoming, I know there's this unifying shared experience that we have, and we can have a conversation. We'll probably give each other a hug because we're a family. And I love that. And that's hopeful for me as we enter this new season in America.
Wonderful. Well said, Alan. Melissa, how about you?
I don't know how I'm going to follow that, but I will try. I think for me, the last 5 or so years I've spent a lot of time doing veteran advocacy work. And so really tactically, like this week is about trying to make the most of the mind share that America gives us on Veterans Day, right? I know that the other 364 days a year, people on this call and other members of the veteran community are, are tirelessly advocating and trying to like bring the ladder so that we can raise more up with us. Mm-hmm. But I think this time of year, it's really important that we help non-veterans understand like what the experiences of veterans are. So usually my like Veterans Days are busy with stuff like this, right? Where we're talking about what does it mean to be a veteran and what does it mean to be a female veteran. I think this Veterans Day, I'm particularly struck by the work of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Without her, women would not be able to serve in the military. Without her and her use of, it's actually like the foundation of using male military spouses as a way to talk about the disparity of genders, and how women service members didn't get the same benefits as male service members because they had husbands and not wives. And so it's actually showing that actually female service members should also get support for their spouse. It's just really, it's a really interesting time to be reflecting on the amazing work that she did that impacts so many pieces of our world, but also hugely impacts the female military and veteran experience. So this Veterans Day, I'll be doing a little bit more sending the love to RBG wherever she is.
Right on. Well said, Melissa. Yeah. I mean, Veterans Day is a holiday that I actually kind of struggle with a little bit. Like, I don't know, it still does feel weird to be thanked for my service. And that's something I hope that we can actually dive into next time. I know it's a evolving discussion in the veteran community and just as a nation, like, what does it mean when we say thank you for your service? But honestly, I think, Cal, you kind of hit on something that I think really resonated with me, which is the idea that it doesn't really feel like I did all that much. And especially when each of us has folks that we came into the service with that is still there. We know people that have taken like debilitating injuries. We know people that their operational tempo, their op tempo is so fast that they don't have time with their families. And like, I live a cushy life, like I use my service in transition, and like, it doesn't feel like I did that much. And I actually kind of feel like a little bit of a little weight on my heart when my texts are blowing up, especially from my family, both my wife's family and my family. And they'll be like, hey, happy Veterans Day. Thanks for your service. Proud of you, all this stuff. And I'll be like, yeah, but compared to what like some of my classmates are doing right now all over the world in places they can't talk about, like I basically like swept the floor, compared to some of these other folks, or that's how it feels like. But I think I definitely echo every single one of you. Like, we're just so fortunate, so lucky to live in this country, and in this time when we do live in a country that more so now than ever before, I think we're able to separate honoring the service from the actual mission. Right? You don't have to necessarily agree with the mission, but you can respect the service, as opposed to days in Vietnam when like it was very hard for people to separate those two in our country. So we should be very grateful for that. Folks, this concludes our first of 3 live stream broadcasts on Tribe. We're going to keep talking and diving in on the veteran experience. The conversation doesn't have to stop here. Continue sending us questions anonymously at safe.99pagesclub.com. You can do that anytime you'd like. Reach out to us if you'd like. And thank you all on this panel for not only being here, but sincerely thank you for your service. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rajiv.
Hey, all right.